Achieved with CryEngine 3.
Hey there guys, this is Charm the Charmeleon, and this is MechWarrior Online. Zephyr Skyblade requested I play this, and I've been really busy with this particular project, but I figured I'd set aside that for a little bit and jump into this a bit. First off, I'm just going to show off the mech that I have been using for this game. It's been kind of addictive, and I've been playing quite a bit. The Fire Rush, as I have named her, JENNER JR7-F. It's a light mech. This is a mech game, if it isn't obvious. And you have light, medium, heavy, and assault mechs. Assault mechs being for basically long-range combat, and all the other ones are fairly obviously different sizes and amounts of power. I'm just showing off the different upgrades and accessories that I have on this Jenner. The Jenner is a very light mech, actually one of the smallest, which works for me because I actually prefer mobility over brute strength. I've basically purchased a lot of the upgrades for this particular Jenner already. The mech trees over here show a few other abilities that I can just quickly go through. Obviously this isn't the combat portion of the game, so it's not too interesting, but I figured showing off my loadout might be interesting to those mechophiles out there. I'm not a mechophile myself, but I do like mechs. I mean, mechs are awesome. You can't deny that. I mean, they're giant, they shoot things, and they're powerful, and they're usually towering above buildings. You can't really go wrong with mechs, even if you're not a real big mech fan. And I'm not, but you know what? Mech games are pretty awesome. So let's jump into the first stage I'm going to show you. There's only 4 stages because this is a beta. This is Caustic Valley. I'm going to show I'm going to show 2 stages in this video, and then 2 stages in tomorrow's video. Caustic Valley is a rather open playing area. It gives my Jenner plenty of room to run around, but I gotta be very careful about assault mechs because their long range attacks, they have a lot of breathing area they can hit me with. In this case, I'm telling my teammates over there in the corner, what's our plan? I wasn't really given one, so I decided to kind of form my own. Wait for him to come to our side, said Kushko. That was a decent idea, but I needed to make sure the summit was also kept attended to. Caustic Valley is essentially, the center of the map is essentially a volcano. It's not generally a good idea to fight there because you will raise your temperature gauge, which has a very large impact on how you play that gauge. Firing your weapons, using your jump jets if you have the ability to do that, and other things will generally turn up your temperature, and if your temperature hits 100, then you will overheat and be pretty much defenseless. You can see the heat gauge there on the right side of the map. It's the 9% right now. Other things to keep in mind is speedometer on the left of the map, and the bar next to it is my jump jet meter, basically how much propulsion I have available in my jump jets at any one time. Stats to the left include, well, I'll get into that after we deal with this enemy that happened to pop up right out of nowhere. This is a fellow Jenner, a red one for some reason. I've never seen red ones before this. It seemed to be doing the exact same thing as me as scouting, but it was a little more aggressive about it, so I decided to shoo it away with a laser blast. Now my Jenner actually has 6 lasers, which is a lot. The downside of this is, if you notice, one shot, one volley of all 6 lasers, and my heat meter basically shoots up to half of its length. So I have to be very careful about how often I shoot. You can actually do different loadouts, though. You can see that I have some lit up 2s. That means if I use the right mouse click, I'll only shoot 3 of my lasers. So if I need to conserve, that's a good thing. You can see basically what I'm doing right now is scouting the enemies, and there's plenty of them. And you can actually earn experience for scouting. Basically just looking at an enemy and keeping them in your targeting can give you experience. Fast mechs like the Jenner are generally good at scouting because if I get into trouble I can back off, and I just got into trouble because they finally noticed that I was looking a little too much at them and they got a little annoyed at that. Those were mostly heavy mechs, and you can see a volley of missiles from an LRM user, or long-range missile user, which I think was going to be aimed at me but completely missed. Those things can really home in though, so you have to be real careful. Your mech has different body parts, as you can see on the left, and I can actually have things like my arm blown off, which eliminates the weapons on that arm, etc. So you can kind of be dismantled piece by piece, or if you get your middle destroyed, that ends you. That you're done. I think if your head gets destroyed, you lose sensors, but it doesn't happen very often for some reason. Basically, this round started off rather slowly because I was mostly scouting and glitching through a mountain, which kind of freaked me out for a second. But I managed to correct myself, so that's always good. It's not a good idea to fight on top of this volcano because it happens to be a volcano. Basically, anywhere where there's smoke coming out, there's a very large heat signature if I were to turn on my heat vision, which you have, by the way. Besides night vision, you also have heat vision. Very useful occasionally, but I never end up actually using it in any of these videos. Eventually I decided that there's really no point in me scouting there anymore, and since I noticed our base is suddenly under attack, I decided to go help. This is the main game mechanic. There's two ways to win a game: eliminate everybody on the opposite team, or capture the enemy's base. You can see the meter above where it says friendly and enemy. You can see the friendly meter has a chunk taken out of it. That's because the enemies were hanging out on the base and they took out that chunk. If it reaches the orange middle, then we lose. Of course, that can be said the same for the enemy's red bar. So that's something to consider. It's also a possibility to win by timeout, which I think it just counts whoever's has more teammates alive. And if it's the same amount, I think it also factors in how much damage you have, and basically the healthiest team wins. But that doesn't ever actually really happen. Oftentimes, the one team is eliminated, or one team captures a base before that time limit is actually hit. Here I'm basically just trying to get in the mix of things, but hills are in my way. That's not really a big deal, though. I like this Jenner because the jump jets are really useful. And before using the Jenner, I used a mech without any jumping abilities, and my god, I don't think I can go back to a jumpless mech after this, because it is really useful to fly around, and it's gotten me out of a lot of bad situations. As you can see, it's basically a big brawl happening here. Me and some heavier allies against a whole bunch of fast mechs. Mostly Jenners, as far as I can tell. That mech there that was sitting idle had a shutdown, as I just had a shutdown because I overheated myself. Different maps heat you up in different ways. Like there's a snow map, which I'll be showing off next, in which you don't heat up quite as fast at all, which is really quite logical when you think about it. So my Jenner has some pretty good attacks. I mean, just a ton of lasers. Does good damage, pretty good. Medium lasers. Not as good as large, better than small. But as you notice, I'm just kind of following this guy because I honestly can't hit him with my heat meter high. Now that my heat meter is at half, though, I can safely shoot him, but he's trying to get away from me and being sneaky. It's actually somewhat difficult to aim a laser because it's a long and constant beam. If you actually want to do any decent damage, you have to keep that beam on the enemy. And while everything's moving around, you're moving around and rotating and trying to lock on, it's actually rather hard to keep the laser centered on an enemy unless you're really close to them or they're stationary. So sometimes you just have to kind of shoot and hope for the best. Fighting is still rather intense around the base. Fortunately, we do have an LRM user of our own, just randomly pot shotting, which has done a lot of good as far as I can tell. I'm getting my random pot shots in. As a light mech, I'm not the one to do the major damage, but as far as something that can harass, I can do a good job with that. Generally, you'll find that mechs are less armored in the back. That's why you see I have a rear view. I only theoretically have 3 pieces of armor associated with the rear, which basically means a rear, middle, rear shoulder blades. And those, I mean, you can put more armor to the rear if you want. You can actually customize exactly how much armor you have on each piece of your mech. But most people will under armor their rear because, well, you don't want to be back attacked. So if you're getting back attacked, you're already kind of doing it wrong, so you want to turn around. So the back doesn't need to be that armored, but it also makes it a wonderful weak point if you can get behind an enemy that isn't being attentive enough to notice it's getting back attacked. But ultimately, the enemies are almost dead, as I just pulled up real fast the scoreboard to show that off and to take a look at myself. At this point, I'm just wondering where that enemy might happen to be. It's quite possible that enemy is AFK, as I'm saying in the chat. It's hard to tell for sure, but it's a good possibility. AFKers are kind of annoying in this game. This is a very team-oriented game, which is both wonderful and terrible at the same time. If you end up with a bad team, well, not much you can do. And here's a victory screen. As you can see, I didn't actually do that much damage, but I'm a good harasser all the same, and damage isn't my focus, so that's alright. Alright, now moving on to Frozen City. Frozen Salty, I was going to say? I don't know. Frozen City. It's basically Antarctica, as far as I can tell. This place is unfortunately a little bit leggier than most places. Probably because of all the fog effects, I don't know. But this is probably the leggiest part of the videos you're going to be watching, and I'm sorry for that. But, all the same, it's a pretty interesting map. The main geographical detail of this place is that there's a tunnel that goes basically between one base and the other. It's a wonderful way for a fast scout like me to randomly sneak into an enemy base. But if the enemy decides to use the tunnel as well, you end up in kind of a choke point situation. I had a few people follow me, but they didn't actually follow me as much as I thought they would. They thought it was a good idea, but they didn't actually go into the tunnel, they kind of just hung around it. So I was left alone in the tunnel. I don't particularly like that situation, because the enemy decides to do a full assault through the tunnel, that basically puts me in front of a whole bunch of guys I can't dodge. Here we immediately see, while I'm trying to type something, that there is a random mech coming along, and I think that was an Raven? Or was it a Jenner? Apparently I thought it was a Jenner at the time, but now I think it's a Raven. I don't know. It did turn out to be a Jenner. So, there's actually two exits to the cave. The one where I came in from, and the one here just to the left of where I'm walking by. That's where that Jenner went. I stopped caring about that guy, though, and kept going. Because I decided that, you know, that enemy base is probably a tempting target. The reason I like to stand still at times, even though I'm normally a fast mech and should keep moving, is that you can actually hear enemies thud, 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 because mechs aren't exactly, you know, stealthy. So if I just stop my mech from moving whatsoever, I can sometimes pick out if an enemy's coming, just based on sounds. Now I spot an Awesome, which is a heavy mech, and at first I think it's an idle AFKer guy, but it turns out that he actually isn't. I'm glad I noticed this before I decided to go up and start pot-shotting him because, well, I don't really like to go against heavy mechs alone. Also, this guy came out of nowhere, and I think might have been the same mech that I was spotting earlier. Hard to tell. In any case, it looked like it had a bit of a vendetta to attack me. So, I decided to run away. Again, I don't like fighting in the tunnels if I can avoid it. However, it doesn't seem like I'm pursued either. Seeing that he's not really coming after me, I eventually decide that it's not a bad idea to return. Perhaps he was just trying to harass me enough to make me back off, and wasn't actually aggressively attacking. So it was a little hard to tell at this point. However, it does seem that he was stalking me. I can get a bit of a free hit on him, though I could have gotten that hit better. I only hit with a portion of that laser attack, unfortunately. And at this point, this map likes to rear its ugly, leggy head by causing us to glitch around a bit while we're trying to stalk each other. And of course, both of us are running into walls because these tunnels are way too tight to really attack. My attack utterly missed, which I hate it when that happens, but it happens. Then I decide to just run into him for a while, which unfortunately gives him more of an opportunity to hurt me than I thought he would. Finally, I got a good hit off, but again, kind of obnoxious fighting situation in a tunnel like this, so I decided to get out. I'm actually perfectly fine fighting with a Raven or a fellow Jenner. mano a mano, but not in such a situation. I await my prey. And then I miss with one of my lasers, because I forget location of the lasers equals kind of wider than my targeting reticle. Oh well. It happens sometimes. Fortunately, it looks like one of my teammates noticed the fellow here too. Decided to potshot him with missiles. Always a nice thing to potshot with. However, this guy really does want a piece of me, even though he got attacked by somebody else. Again, we're both kind of glitching. I decide to use my jump jets. He decides to use his. And we're just kind of locked in this little duel. I consider changing targets and helping the main group, but you know what? This guy really is asking for it, this Jenner. Unfortunately, that last hit he got on me actually caused critical damage, which is basically a warning indicating that I think it indicates that any limb, I think it's an indication that one of my limbs, one of my body mech portions are about to basically be blown off. I don't think it only applies to the middle, but it does apply to that as well. I think in this case it's because my leg is red. This is pretty bad, because if my leg gets blown off, then all the advantages of a fast mech are basically eliminated, because now I'm hobbling around. You can still move around. Actually, the leg doesn't actually get blown off, but its ability to function is basically eliminated, more or less. This guy really wants a piece of me. I am his sole focus, even with all these missiles coming at him. Normally I'd find it amusing, but under critical damage I found it kind of intimidating. Especially since my chest is now red as well. I'm very close to death now, and trying my best to survive. However, a fellow Jenner here, who also seems to be having a bit of problems considering he doesn't have a weapon on his left side, did actually manage to take out that Jenner that was attacking me, which is nice. Finally finished with my little duel, I decided to go and see what everybody else is doing. I also see a guy named Mark Ragnos who has gold text. Very unusual. And unfortunately I decided to pick a fight I just couldn't win. And finally I fell. Fortunately, dying doesn't mean you lose, necessarily. It all depends on what the rest of your team does. And fortunately, the rest of the team was pretty dang capable. Here I am switching between other team members. You can do this when you are dead. Which is nice, because then you can look around and see what's going on. But yeah, that's the end of the round. And also the end of this video. Tune in next time for the other two maps, guys. Peace out.